Varvara's Diary, Part 1. I was only 14 when my father died. My childhood was the happiest time of my life. It began not here, but far away in a province in the wilds. My father was the steward of Prince P's huge estate in the province of T. We lived in one of the prince's villages, and led a quiet, obscure, happy life. I was a playful little thing. I used to do nothing but run about the fields, the copses, and the gardens, and no one troubled about me. My father was constantly busy about his work. My mother looked after the house. No one taught me anything, for which I was very glad. Sometimes at daybreak I would run away either to the pond, or to the copse, or to the hayfield, or to the reapers, and it did not matter that the sun was baking, that I was running I did not know where, away from the village, that I was scratched by the bushes, that I tore my dress. I should be scolded afterwards at home, but I did not care for that. And it seems to me that I should have been so happy if it had been my lot to have spent all my life in one place, and never to have left the country. But I had to leave my native place while I was still a child. I was only 12 when we moved to Petersburg. Ah, how well I remember our sorrowful preparations! How I cried when I said good-bye to everything that was so dear to me! I remember that I threw myself on father's neck and besought him with tears to remain a little longer in the country. Father scolded me. Mother wept. She said that we had to go, that we could not help it. Old Prince P was dead. His heirs had discharged father from his post. Father had some money in the hands of private persons in Petersburg. Hoping to improve his position, he thought his presence here in person essential. All this I learnt from mother. We settled here on the Petersburg side, and lived in the same spot up to the time of father's death. How hard it was for me to get used to our new life. We moved to Petersburg in the autumn. When we left the country, it was a clear, warm, brilliant day. The work of the fields was over. Huge stacks of wheat were piled up on the threshing floors, and flocks of birds were calling about the fields. Everything was so bright and gay. Here, as we came into the town, we found rain, damp autumn chilliness, muggy grayness, sleet, and a crowd of new, unknown faces, unwelcoming, ill-humored, angry. We settled in somehow. I remember we were all in such a fuss, so troubled and busy in arranging our new life. Father was never at home. Mother had not a quiet minute. I was forgotten altogether. I felt sad getting up in the morning after the first night in our new abode. Our windows looked out on a yellow fence. The street was always covered with mud. The passers-by were few, and they were all muffled up. They were all so cold. And for whole days together it was terribly miserable and dreary at home. We had scarcely a relation or intimate acquaintance. Father was not on friendly terms with Anna Fyodorovna. He was in her debt. People came on business to us pretty often. Usually they quarreled, shouted, and made an uproar. After every visit, father was ill-humored and cross. He would walk up and down the room by the hour together, frowning and not saying a word to anyone. Mother was silent then, and did not dare to speak to him. I used to sit in a corner over a book, still and quiet, not daring to stir. 3 months after we came to Petersburg, I was sent to boarding school. How sad I was at first with strangers. Everything was so cold, so unfriendly. The teachers had such loud voices, the girls laughed at me so, and I was such a wild creature. It was so stern and exacting. The fixed hours for everything, the meals in common, the tedious teachers, all that at first fretted and harassed me. I could not even sleep there. I used to cry the whole night, the long, dreary, cold night. Sometimes, when they were all repeating or learning their lessons in the evening, I would sit over my French translation or vocabularies, not daring to move, and dreaming all the while of our little home, of father, of mother, of our old nurse, of nurse's stories. Oh, how I used to grieve! The most trifling thing in the house I would recall with pleasure. I would keep dreaming how nice it would be now at home. I should be sitting in our little room by the samovar with my own people. It would be so warm, so nice, so familiar. How I used to think I would hug mother now, how tightly, how warmly. One would think and begin crying softly from misery, choking back one's tears, and the vocabularies would never get into one's head. I could not learn my lessons for next day. All night I would dream of the teacher, the mistress, the girls. All night I would be repeating my lessons in my sleep, and would not know them next day. They would make me kneel down and give me only one dish for dinner. I was so depressed and dejected. At first all the girls laughed at me and teased me and tried to confuse me when I was saying my lessons, pinched me when in rows we walked into dinner or tea, made complaints against me to the teacher for next to nothing. But how heavenly it was when nurse used to come for me on Saturday evening. I used to hug the old darling in a frenzy of joy. She would put on my things and wrap me up, and could not keep pace with me while I would chatter and tell her everything. I would arrive home, gay and happy, would hug everyone as though I had been away for 10 years. There would be explanations, talks, descriptions would begin. I would greet everyone, laugh, giggle, skip, and run about. Then there would be serious conversations with father about our studies, our teachers, French, Le Mans grammar, and we were all so pleased and happy. It makes me happy even now to remember those minutes. I tried my utmost to learn and please father. I saw he was spending his last farthing on me, and God knows what straits he was in. Every day he grew more gloomy, more ill-humored, more angry. His character was quite changed. His business was unsuccessful. He had a mass of debts. Mother was sometimes afraid to cry, afraid to say a word for fear of making father angry. She was getting quite ill, was getting thinner and thinner, and had begun to have a bad cough. When I came back from school, I used to find such sad faces, mother weeping stealthily, father angry. Then there would be scolding and upbraiding. Father would begin saying that I was no joy, no comfort to them, that they were depriving themselves of everything for my sake, and I could not speak French yet. In fact, all his failures, all his misfortunes were vented on me and mother. And how could he worry poor mother? It was heart-rending to look at her. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes were sunken. There was a hectic flush in her face. I used to come in for more scolding than anyone. It always began with trifles, and goodness knows what it went on to. Often I did not understand what it was about. Everything was a subject of complaint. French, and my being a great dunce, and that the mistress of our school was a careless, stupid woman, that she paid no attention to our morals, that father was still unable to find a job, that Le Mans was a very poor grammar and Zapolsky's was very much better, that a lot of money had been thrown away on me, that I was an unfeeling, stony-hearted girl. In fact, though I, poor thing, was striving my utmost, repeating conversations and vocabularies, I was to blame for everything. I was responsible for everything. And this was not because father did not love me. He was devoted to mother and me, but it was just his character. Anxieties, disappointments, failures worried my poor father to distraction. He became suspicious, bitter. Often he was close upon despair, and he began to neglect his health, caught cold, and all at once fell ill. He did not suffer long, but died so suddenly, so unexpectedly, that we were all beside ourselves with the shock for some days. Mother seemed stunned. I actually feared for her reason. As soon as father was dead, creditors seemed to spring up from everywhere and rushed upon us like a torrent. Everything we had we gave them. Our little house on Petersburg side, which father had bought 6 months after moving to Petersburg, was sold too. I don't know how they settled the rest, but we were left without refuge, without sustenance. Mother was suffering from a wasting disease. We could not earn our bread. We had nothing to live on. Ruin stared us in the face. I was then only just 14. It was at this point that Anna Fyodorovna visited us. She always said that she owned landed estates and that she was some sort of relation of ours. Mother said, too, that she was a relation, only a very distant one. While father was alive, she never came to see us. She made her appearance now with tears in her eyes, and said she felt great sympathy for us. She condoled with us on our loss and our poverty-stricken condition, added that it was father's own fault, that he had lived beyond his means, had borrowed right and left, and that he had been too self-confident. She expressed a desire to be on more friendly terms with us, said we must let bygones be bygones. When mother declared she had never felt any hostility toward her, she shed tears, took mother to church, and ordered a requiem service for the dear man. That was how she referred to father. After that, she was solemnly reconciled to mother. After leading up to the subject in many lengthy preambles, Anna Fyodorovna first depicted in glaring colors our poverty-stricken and forlorn position, our helplessness and hopelessness, and then invited us, as she expressed it, to take refuge with her. Mother thanked her, but for a long time could not make up her mind to accept. But seeing that there was nothing else she could do and no help for it, she told Anna Fyodorovna at last that we would accept her offer with gratitude. I remember as though it were today the morning on which we moved from the Petersburg side to Vasilyevsky Ostrov. It was a clear, dry, frosty autumn morning. Mother was crying. I felt horribly sad. My heart was torn and ached with a terrible, inexplicable misery. It was a terrible time.